We need a party, so I've mentioned it myself now that we need a democracy manifest party.
You don't need a party.
The guy needs to look exactly like the dude, and he needs to have
it's like you do the
he needs to have
thing.
Tourette's syndrome.
So everyone's got to put a mask on. You got to put the dude's face on.
Exactly like the dude.
And just be like, my character doesn't have any.
It's like a poser party, right? They're just the one dude, and they've all got Tourette's. That's the prerequisite of being in there and wearing the mask is you must have Tourette's syndrome.
You must.
Yeah, you must.
All right. I'm just gonna like. Look. I think.
Paints a good picture of the gallery. You either want Parliament or you got Play School. I mean, it's either. There's no in between.
Well, I don't want Parliament.
You want Play School?
No, I don't want anything. I don't want either of them.
You want a new choice. You want option C. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I do.
No, I'm pretty keen for option C because I've never had option C.
I know, right?
So maybe option C might be the way to go.
It has some merit. I mean, the first thing is the first idea of this option C. It's really crazy. So the first idea of option C is if you don't like anyone, you can say no.
Yes. We've been talking about this for a long time. None of the above, mate. And I don't understand why none of the above hasn't turned up yet.
There's a very good reason for why it hasn't turned up yet, my friend. Like, if you want to, I can take you down the rabbit hole of like Australian Electoral Commission results in electorates.
Oh, you don't need to because it'll just
I think I have
previously. But we'd be hashing over old territories, wouldn't we?
The informal vote wins. The people who don't show up win. And the right to say no, it needs to be enshrined. Like, if you don't have the right to say no, then your yes means nothing.
True. And then that's when we went down that whole path of the donkey and the.
Well, you can't do that.
No, I don't. We are not at any point suggesting that you draw a huge donkey's member on the paper
definitely
with a smiley dog. 100%. Do not do that.
That ruins your vote.
It does. It makes it so informal that it could get you in real serious trouble.
Well, no, it won't get you in trouble because
it's defacement of some sort of public document, isn't it?
That's
what it come under if you were a space lawyer or something.
No, the correct thing to do, if you happen to need to draw a donkey's penis on your ballot paper, which is a response, it might be a valid response,
Well, it could be because there is no other option like to say no.
So then
that could be your only way, an artistic expression of saying no.
You need to then take that to the polling returning officer in the poll. You say, no, I just need to speak to the returning offer in the polling booth. And you say, my ballot paper has become damaged.
Yes, it is damaged by my artwork. I'm sorry. I had some extra, the Zolanoff this morning. And it just tipped me over the edge. I thought it was my R class, all right? I'm not in my R class. I'm actually supposed to vote, but this is now an invalid vote. I'm so sorry.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, go for it. And then they claim that as the banner for out the back, like when they have their cups of tea or whatever.
And you say, thank you. And they're like, are you going to just draw another one on it? And I mean, the thing at this point is, right now, the thing at this point is you're not allowed to protest.
No.
So if you start doing multiple times, it starts seeming a little bit kind of like, I did another dick. It just...
I think you'd be getting a sanity check.
Yeah, you could get something.
They'd be pulling people in to do a sanity check. That's it.
So
it might be cool for the first time, but you know what would happen?
So
you would take a vote or a piece of paper, a ballot paper, out of the system.
It would.
And you would automatically get your vote. The next vote would be...
Yeah, you get another one.
Yes, but you've taken one of those sheets out of the system.
Yes. Yeah. I guess that's a weird...
Well, you would have, because it's an informal thing. They've got to give you another one, because, I'm sorry, I got a bit carried away with my artwork.
That is not an informal vote.
Not informal, damage, because I thought it was an art class. Right. Yeah, gotcha.
So because damaging it just means you keep getting...
I am an art student, okay?
So damaging it just means you keep getting another one? So that's not... You can't... That's a loop.
Not
you can't
advisable.
Be in a loop.
Yeah.
Right? Because
that would then... The alarm bells would start going off.
Yeah, so what you want... Because what you actually...
Something suspicious is happening.
So instead of being in a loop, what you want to do is...
the lady that's looking after that particular polling station might become angered because of your behaviour.
No, it's still... Honestly, we're still about to anger them. So genuinely, this has to be genuine, right?
Yeah.
If you feel, and I don't mean that it can't be genuine, if you feel that your first preference is not on the ballot paper, right, none of those are your first preference, then you can take it up to the returning officer and say, my first preference is not on the ballot paper.
Yeah.
And as a result, I'm unable to mark it.
Oh, the option out.
Well,
that's not available.
And so, read the legislation and be very specific in it. But you say this thing, and they don't know what this is anyway, because that's not their experience. They don't understand the fuck. So then they will still break down. But what happens is, as opposed to just having a piece of paper loop, you don't have a loop, right? Because what you've actually had is a crash. Right? So instead of creating a loop,
unavailable. Selection unavailable.
You want to create a crash. Yeah, you want to crash this. You crash it, and it breaks upon itself. And then
would have been much better. Like, even if maybe saying to them when they question you about it, it would have been much better if none of the above was available because I couldn't make my primary selection.
No, don't say that. No, because that's not in the Electoral Act. You can't say things that are not in the Electoral Act. You know, now you're talking about a fantasy world. You can't.
Fantasies,
You can't talk about you got to talk about what's real, right?
Reality.
The reality.
The reality.
I don't know if my fingers are quite doing the...
no, they are. They're good. They're doing the reality. They're doing the reality. That's right. They're doing the reality mode. That's right.
Good.
Yeah, cool.
That you don't know because you got to be very careful what you're saying.
Very negative. Yeah.
Because they said, because that isn't on there. You can't do that. That's not an option. So you can't ask for things that aren't real.
Yeah.
But then at this point, what happens is interesting because you can't. So what happens is if you can't mark a ballot paper, you can't fold it because you can only fold a ballot paper
when it's completed. Yeah, that's right.
Well, so as to conceal a vote. So it has to have a vote on it, right? So you can't actually fold it if you've got a dick on it because that's not a vote. You actually have to have that exposed.
Yeah, true. That's artwork. So show that legally. Legally, that is art, and you can say there was damage.
This is fucking. You follow the law, right? Follow the Electoral Act, and you watch it go haywire. Right. So you've got to take that up, and they're like, but anyway, but back to us. You got to go with a blank one, so that's not.
But you're getting some laughs while you're doing it, though, because obviously that part is a comedy bit. Like some might get offended, but a lot of people just going to look at it and go, "Oh my goodness."
But back to the problem is that if you put a dick on it, you've damaged it, and they have to give you another one.
True.
And then you're being vexatious.
Yeah.
You're being started.
Well, you are causing issues because you're causing an issue. And you keep drawing
look, I did another dick. You know.
No, well, that's right. That is vexatious. So you'll probably be ejected.
So you can't. Don't do that.
You'll be ejected from the facility. That's right. Don't do that.
I have nothing on it. And then my preference isn't right. And as such, I'm unable to fold the ballot paper. Right? Because then the only way you're allowed to put it in the ballot box is if it's folded.
Yes.
And then you can't leave the polling station. You're stuck because you can only leave after you've
folded and placed it in the special box. That's right.
So now you're stuck and they're stuck and it's broken. And what happens next is, as you can imagine, is they're going to freak out in some degree, even if you've notified them in advance.
Yeah, true.
Trying to make it so it doesn't happen because you don't want to cause a scene.
Peaceful, so there would be some sort of legal negotiator who can go, yes, this is acceptable. That's right.
Because then we're going to do this really interesting scenario. What are they going to do? Because if we get to the end of the day, in a federal election, if you're in a polling station with the intent to vote, you're allowed to be there after 6 p.m. There is no cutoff to that, by the way, in the legislation. It's just after. You can be there, right? And they cannot start counting. So you lock the entire booth, right? Because you crash the whole booth after 6 p.m., right? And then this is very distressing.
Yeah, I could imagine it would be if you're trying to do your job. Like you'd be getting a bit heated by now, wouldn't you? Because you'd be wanting to finish up.
Yeah, you want to finish. Start yelling. So in the Electoral Act, it's very specific around coercion. The penalties around coercion, force, threatening.
I know. Yeah, for that bit. Yeah.
So, for example, if they started being verbal to you, so that's like verbal coercion.
Negatory.
Yeah. So they're now you have Australian Electoral Commission officers breaching the Australian Electoral Act on you.
Yes.
That's jail for everyone who does that.
That is a federal offence, not a
serious. Is fucking serious business. Right?
Serious.
So you're not breaking the law. You're not breaking the law, right? You're unable to market. You're just acknowledging that. You're just openly, instead of lying and breaking the law, instead of breaking the law, instead of breaking the law and folding it and not having a vote on it and putting an empty one in there, which is breaking the law.
Yes, correct.
Putting in a formal vote in there is breaking the law. So you're not breaking. You're trying to not break the law. So you're not breaking the law.
Putting a damaged form in there is also breaking the law.
That's right. So you have to do this, right? You have no real option. That's all available, right? And then they break the law on you like a motherfuckers, right? And they might get the police. They might get the state police,
which really is none of their business. It should be a federal issue. That's right. None of their business.
And then the state police will come in and they'll have you on the ground and they're like violent, like threatening to harm you.
Well, isn't that also interfering in an election?
Yeah.
Technically.
So all those police officers, they need to be arrested by federal police. Yeah. Because they're all now threatening, like in physical force and violence upon you to vote in a particular way.
Yeah. Which, isn't your selection.
No.
Coercion.
This is democracy manifest.
It is democracy. Get your hands off my penis.
Get your hands off my penis.
Don't even start.
You're on the floor.
Putting your hands on my penis unless there's dinner and dancing.
Being thrown to the floor, you're revoking my constitutional right as an Australian. You're
Be very careful. Treading on thin ice, they call that, don't they?
Yeah, as a state police officer, you are revoking my constitutional right as an Australian to vote. And I'm not making this. None of this is fabricated.
They will fuck you up.
This is a real business.
You don't fuck with the feds.
I've done this in a federal election, and they refused to press charges because there was no charges. Like there was nothing they could charge me for. I'd done nothing wrong.
You hadn't broken any law. Federal law.
No law was broken. And I told the police, I said, go in and arrest them because they've revoked my constitutional right. They've breached the Electoral Act in these fucking parts. I had the Electoral Act right there in my hands. I'm handing it to him. I'm like, hey. And he's like, I'm not going to go and do that.
Well, it's because you're a wuss.
Bada boom.
Bada bang, bada bing.
When the organs, and you've got to realize this, the organs, they just come together. They just work together. Don't even make no mistake. They'll all protect each other, even they don't even realize it.
Big biz, man. Don't give a fuck.
Don't even think about it.
Your employee, Listen to my song.
No, you just get fucked.
I don't give a
so
fuck.
yeah, I've illegally had my constitutional right to vote in Australia revoked by the Australian Electoral Commission, and by using the Queensland Police Force, like to threaten me with physical violence. And they were going to break my hand. They were going to snap my fingers.
That's fucked up, man.
Yeah, they're going to snap my fingers unless I gave up my right to vote.
Undemocracy manifest.
That's fucking. That's it.
That is undemocracy manifest.
And wouldn't press charges after they were going to snap my fingers. Nothing. Crazy. No charge. I've done nothing wrong. Breaking my fingers for nothing wrong. Yeah. Police, mate.
Groundbreaking. You got to break some ground occasionally, bro. You know what I mean? Like
you do, man. You do.
Yeah. If you're not doing it, no one else will.
Which brings us to today, which is where I can't do that because unfortunately in my electorate, my preference is on the ballot paper.
Yes.
So because my preference is on the ballot paper, I'm unable to do the thing because if I did, it would be a protest.
Yes.
It wouldn't be genuine.
Correct.
And you've got to be, you're not allowed to protest in some polling, but you've got to be genuine.
That's right.
No, and that's it. And seriously, if you are in there,
paid protesters need not apply.
Need not apply. Yeah. No. Crisis Act is not required.
Crisis Act
no,
is
it just causes problems.
Get in the way. Get in the way of real,
a real
democracy manifesting.
Yeah, exactly. and there are you just need like one or two people, just to go into polling booths, and you can just lock down like just swathes of the election, just bam, just lock down. Yeah. Massive scale. Like it's very easy.
And it's so easy. They could fix it in an instant. On the bottom, none of the above. Add inclusion, none of the above. So, selection not provided, even if it's not none of the above. Selection not provided, where they can tick that
it's important
in the bucket, and that's automatically classed as none of the above. It wasn't on the list.
Sure. I try not to get into specifying how it should be presented. I mean, I can. It's easy. Like you put a box that says none of the above or no or whatever. It's
or
blank.
just no selection.
Just no selection. Just leave it blank.
Selection not available. Yeah.
It's blank. Yeah. That's its meaning. Yeah. None. There was none on there.
None on there. But I could even into the smallest part of my being support or want to tick. Yeah.
Well, no, that's not the truth. Your second preference can be on there.
Oh, okay, but you don't have your first one.
That's right.
Omitted or just not on the ballot. Yeah.
My first preference. What I would prefer is not there. Yes, it's simple.
I get that.
But you go, my preference is not on the ballot paper. And you see your second preference, third preference, whatever. So, that's going to because you can't mark your second preference until you've marked your first. That's illegal too. Well, not even illegal. It's just not possible. It's like I know you can't.
Well, I know who I'm hitting.
Like when you actually write down two first. Like say you went onto a ballot paper and you wrote down instead of writing 1 first, you wrote 2 and 4. That actually you'd have broken the law.
So if you did it in reverse, like if you counted down.
That's breaking the law. That's breaking the law.
Okay. So you got to do it in order. There you go. Learnings of democracy, starring Eamon Cyber.
You've got to do your first preference, right? And then you can follow. And after your first preference, then depending on the situation, there's a whole bunch of different rules because it depends on the type of election and a whole bunch of other things that happen.